Brother Julianus, no doubt you wonder why I have not written in so long. I wonder the reverse, at least. But there comes a point when stubbornness must be laid aside, do you not think? Myself and Constans have done much, as you must know. Great and proud people now call themselves Roman again. And yet, not all Romans will allow the same title to be given to them, or I. I understand there is some legal barrier to you recognizing us, and yes, I understand that this is at least partially my own fault. But wouldn't it be more apt to simply consider us to be generals of Rome? We hold no political rank, we have no seat in the Senate, but we have conquered for Britannia, for Rome, and simply await instructions on who exactly has the legal authority to begin governing these lands, you understand? And in the meantime, we've done an underrated job of keeping them in our hands. The time has come for you and for the Senate to properly take claim of these lands. Perhaps it surprises you to see me write this. I wouldn't have just a year ago, sure. But the truth is, we need to be led. With no alternative, the people and the troops must follow the leadership of Constans, who cares not at all for his people, beyond the money and prestige they represent. He wants to invade Asia. He wants to take all our legions against the Sassanids. And all after so much effort was spent to bring the shattered communities of Macedonia back to life. You must know how I feel, right? I can't oppose him. My association to him keeps the troops under control. But he is an outlaw, and should the law finally catch up, there could be a way to draw firm borders and win some peace for these people. I know not what your intrigues are, but I urge you, follow the Senate to Rome. Make them understand that the work of we brothers is ignored at the peril of the very world itself. Hello and welcome back to Fields of Mars. In the previous episode we saw Attila's fighting two decisive battles against the Gepids, in both cases taking settlements, their final two settlements. We were victorious of course, but these fights did take their toll on his army. They were very slow and grindy engagements, although we did manage to use some exploitative tactics to make it a bit easier. And speaking of exploitative tactics, we had Aurelianus attacking an Aran landing force in Greece, where he pretended to attack their fort in order to draw a second army to be spawn camped on the battle map, and then he simply left without attacking the fort, denying the enemy a battle that would have been on their own terms, and winning us the best decisive defeat we've had so far. So we're now just in the turn after that battle, and we learn that one of our experienced governors has died of natural causes. Very inconvenient and of course a tragedy, but we also learn that Tullus's loyalty is wavering. It seems he's finally getting annoyed about the fact that we're making him do all the work and he's not really getting anything out of it. Perhaps we pushed him too hard to suddenly conquer northern Italia recently. We can actually come and check and see what exactly the problem is. There are various things affecting his lack of loyalty. One of them is that he doesn't like the fact that some of his underlings have been promoted to office positions, which I didn't actually remember doing. It's been ages since I did it, so he must have been disloyal for that reason for a long time now. So I decided to promote Tullus to Master of State, and then while that promotion is going through, he is going to try and finish off the Gepids. There is a horde nearby left over from the battle at Ravenna, and of course they can't do anything against his forces as they just slashed through it. And that actually didn't end the Gepids as I expected. I came here to check on the diplomacy screen because that will tell us where their capital currently is, and it's in the middle of the sea, which means they must have one of the weird seaborne hordes, which I still don't really understand how it works in this game, but you can do it. So their entire people are now in these boats in the middle of the sea, and we'll just have to wait and see what they do, since we can't really afford to go after them right now. I've got some reinforcements arriving here in Sicily to join the standoff against 3 enemy stacks who for whatever reason just aren't really doing anything, so I'm not even going to prod them. I want them to continue to forget why they came and just do nothing, because that suits me. I think they would probably win if they actually went on offensives over there. So more bad news blasting past there, rebellions and disease coming in, but we've got an event here. I've asked Uther to speak with Tullus in an attempt to get him more on board, if not with the Senate, but with our military administration as the ruling faction. And we have two options here. We can give him a small bribe or a large bribe. So he definitely wants a bribe, or we can just forget about the whole thing, which of course won't help us at all. So even though a large bribe would of course be more appropriate to get more loyalty, I decided that Uther probably doesn't feel particularly personally invested in the whole business, so went for a small bribe so that he can just go home with minimal expense to himself. Now, Tullus' current mission is going to be to continue the redevelopment of Northern Italia. He needs to rebuild this settlement here, but we don't have the economic strength to actually do it. So right now, we'll just have to hang around and see if the opportunity does arise. Meanwhile, Constans has another fanciful idea about what he can do by going to attack the territories across the sea to the east. So our target this time is going to be the province of Asia, so focusing on the coast here, going down to the south from where he is right now, and Aurelianus being dragged along to provide support. It is going to leave our lands relatively open, but those Aran forces we saw earlier have just disappeared. I think they just went home after a while. So now we're in the next turn, and I was ready to make my attack, but actually it's not going to happen. I was going to move south towards those cities there and perhaps start some sieges, but Constans has been attacked by an agent who has sapped pretty much all of his movement range, so he's able to shuffle about a little bit, and Aurelianus will go over to support him again, but this is going a lot slower than expected as a result of that. Now, the Aran forces who we would have fought on this little invasion actually start going out to sea just there, so this seemed to be a nice opportunity to go and capture a settlement. It seems to be gifted to us by Aran, and we get another very nice thing indeed, which is that the Garamantians want a peace treaty, and the Garamantians make up 2/3 of those forces currently threatening to do something to us over in Sicily. So we get a nice peace deal with them, and that's going to remove much of the threat and allow us to continue ignoring it, but with a little bit more security this time. So I also noticed something was happening with the Eastern Roman separatists, because an army from Pontus has sailed down. It's sitting right outside the docks, and there's no garrison in the town. So I realized right now we could go over and attack the Eastern Roman separatists. The Pontus army would probably be forced into the battle, and Constans would be able to very sneakily make Pontus do all the work so that he could then swoop in and get the capture in the end. Wanting to get this going, I came to check the diplomacy of the Eastern Roman separatists and saw they're at war with loads of people, so basically no one's going to worry about them being taken out. But then I had a double take and spotted that actually they have somehow become a puppet state of Pontus. So it looks like what must have happened is that Pontus has just attacked the Eastern Roman separatists, and instead of retaking their original homelands, which we might assume they were going to do, they actually just reinstated the separatists as the government, which is a bit awkward for us, but at least we get a trade deal out of it, and they seem to like us, so that's something. I hadn't seen him since he was a boy, and the first thing I noticed was the same thing one tended to notice about him back then. That cold, indifferent stare. The stare is now indicative of his very bearing, for without care he seems to stride past guards and officials with no cease for formalities. His irregular gait and twitching fingers make him seem rather unwanted in the tent of a general. But when he speaks, his virtue is shown. He appears to be, surprisingly, a veteran of as many battles as I. Battles that no one speaks of, including he. He directs conversation precisely to the matter at hand and seeks answers. He is quite truly professional, and seemingly untouched by the emotions that drive the rest of his distant brothers. My assumptions have been completely overturned. With local relations now improving slightly, Aurelianus is going to take his excuse to actually just bug out of this little campaign and go back to doing what he should be doing right now, and that's defending those northern territories from the rebels who are all over the place. He has taken and built territories up there and feels slightly responsible for them, so he's going to head off and actually just leave Constans on his own, meaning Constans can't actually plough ahead with the plan to go and attack Aran. One thing he can do, though, is try and sneak up into the highlands and perhaps take a settlement by surprise, or even just destroy a settlement. We spot a potential target here with a gigantic, terrible-looking garrison that we could probably overcome. There are some Macran forces nearby that we'll need to keep in mind. What I can actually do here, in order to just monitor the situation, and perhaps let some forces pass me by so we know that there's nothing near this settlement before we attack, is go into ambush stance, which theoretically makes you invisible to the AI, so they won't know this army is here, and we'll just plough on past it. Now, Tullus is finally in a position to start colonizing Italia. Once again, we've got the money together. He's going to have to give up a lot of his veteran troops in order to do that, but perhaps they deserve the retirement, and now will have to build up even more money to actually continue that colonization and build it up. But look at this. The Huns suddenly declare war on Roman Britain. We expected this to happen a very long time ago. Usually the Huns just attack everyone in these campaigns. For whatever reason, they've been very peaceful, at least from our perspective. They've completely annihilated all of Eastern Europe, but for 2 regions. And in those 2 regions, they've actually settled themselves. So the game's taking a slightly historic turn here. The Huns are actually attempting to form an empire rather than just being the harbingers of the apocalypse, as the game, for whatever reason, paints them out to be. So we'll have to see what comes of that. We get an interesting offer from Asia. They want to buy Constans' daughter in order to marry her to their emperor, the emperor of their tiny little empire in the corner of Asia there, at least. So this is a better deal than previous marriage offers we've received, of course, but I decided that Constans is still just going to basically be stubborn about it and refuse to recognize the authority of Asia's emperor by not allowing his own family to be joined with them. So now I'm just taking a look at the Hun situation. We can actually see one of the regions they've settled already, and it seems they have another one just up to the north, whereas everything else around them is completely wiped out. So they're really just boxed in there, economically speaking, and they are no longer a horde, so they are going to need to try and build up some territory to sustain their troops. In theory, although I think they still actually get free upkeep as part of the game's weird Attila-based mechanics. So as we move on, we see Sassanid troops attacking those Eastern Roman separatists that we're now on good terms with, so that's not very good at all. They seem to wipe out their forces and just leave the settlement in a state. They probably sacked it. The Gepids offer an absolutely outrageous peace deal, actually asking me to pay them in order to gain peace with them. I don't think they understand the balance of power in this situation, so we are just going to ignore them. Aurelianus makes it up north to our front line with the Huns in order to investigate what's going on here, and we immediately see that they actually have vast numbers of forces. So this just confirmed to me as I was playing that they probably are getting a free upkeep here, since they only have 2 regions. They have tons of troops. Aurelianus is going to scurry back behind some walls and basically just wait to see what the Huns do. They didn't attack already, but they may have just been preparing those forces there, so they could attack now. We also see that the Eastern Roman separatist settlement has now been captured by Arria, so they are in a position to attack Constantinopolis from there, and it leaves Constans in a bit of a dodgy situation now, because there's also Aran forces and Macran forces advancing to his west up into our territory. So basically he's got himself completely surrounded by hostiles, and we actually can't go back to Thracia from here. So a bit of a dangerous situation here we've got ourselves into, and Constans can actually use the element of surprise he's going to gain from being hidden all that time to sneak out and attack this smaller army that was trailing behind the enemy's vanguard invasion force. But we're not going to go on to attack it. I want to save my movement points, because really we're not on an offensive here. We need to try and get Constans back into our own territory before these armies all over the place do anything. And really there's only one way we can do that without putting ourselves in a lot of danger, and that is going to be to call on the help of Asia, our allies here. They're actually not at war with Aran, but I realized that if they wanted to marry Constans' daughter, this gives us the perfect opportunity to basically sell her off for a lot of gain. So we do have to offer a lot of money along with it to persuade them to join the war against Aran, but these things together do seem to be persuasive enough. So looks like our family is going to be joined in with the imperial family of Asia, the self-appointed imperial family that is, and Asia's faction will now be at war with Aran. I originally planned to actually only use this defensively, so I'll just sit by their settlement, which would prevent Aran from attacking me without calling in all the garrison and army as reinforcements. But I realized that actually everything is so close together here that I can just attack Aran right now, and that will also call in all of Asia's forces into the battle. And doing so, you can see we get a gigantic advantage against them. So this is actually very nice. It worked out better than even I expected. So I'm just going to auto-resolve that since we have that gigantic advantage, just push through all the generic spears that Aran brought, also taking out a navy at the same time. Unfortunately, it seems that Constans takes the vast majority of the casualties here, not very nice, and the Asian army is also led by another one of Tullus's lookalikes, which is surely the reason for this betrayal. But anyway, at least we've now cut a path back into Thracia. Constans can go back to defend his territory against potential invasions from Arria now, and just see what happens from here. I saw them. I saw him. Tullus is behind everything. Who leads his army now? Does his army even exist? All those reports from the spies, were they fed to us by him? Well, can you not say otherwise? Can you not explain why the man planning to kill me lurks in the very shadows of our camp, watches my door to be joined in marriage, and no doubt directs the eastern scum to counter my every move? You are a disgrace. You will be held responsible for everything. And worst of all, I can tell you with certainty that his agents, perhaps he himself, have already infiltrated the palace at Constantinopolis and begun to corrupt my poor son. He must be kept safe. You are responsible for that too, understand? Get Tullus out of my life! So at long last, the Huns finally make their move on as they cross our borders and are going to attack Aurelianus. They're just laying siege to him right now, but with 3 stacks, he is now thoroughly trapped inside the settlement, so the walls intended to protect him are now actually going to leave him unable to get away from this superior enemy army. They don't attack right away, so we do have a chance to analyze and perhaps react to this situation. We can have a little look at their compositions. We see they have at least a couple of onagers among them. Attila himself also joining the battle here. I wanted to try and see the battle initiation screen because this will sneakily reveal to us everything that the enemy has and we don't actually have to attack them. I noticed though that Attila's army isn't actually in reinforcement range, so the balance spot isn't all that bad. So the enemy have lots of onagers, as I said, and they have lots of really high quality infantry and of course the Hunnic special horse archers, which is going to be the real problem for us because our army can't really deal with horse archers. The traditional counter is to mass foot archers, and we don't really have much of that. The only other thing we can do is just try not to die, use the fact that a lot of our units can use testudo to just try and absorb arrow fire, but doesn't really give us a way to actually kill the horse archers. Now Constans is going to come up to investigate the hubbub. I'm sure there are some rumours from the north reaching the south that a gigantic invasion is on the way, so he is going to move up just close enough to take a look. He can't actually help this turn, so it's possible the Huns will now attack, but whatever the case, we can't really do anything about it, so we'll just have to see what they do. And Tullus also going to move into a more defensive position. I'm sure the Italians don't want to have any part in this Hunnic invasion, so he's going to move up north. The Huns will be somewhat choke-pointed as they come into Italy, so it should be possible to at least guarantee that we'll get to fight against them if they do come to invade, but that doesn't mean of course that we will win. Now the Huns bring down even more forces, bringing their total to 4 stacks now laying siege there, the ideal amount since that's the reinforcement limit. So we're also going to have a little bit of a problem from Arria coming in here, because while Constans is away, they've besieged Constantinopolis and brought a fleet up as well. So now we're basically under siege both in the top left and bottom right of that part of our territory, meaning it's the hardest possible arrangement to defend with all our forces. Macran also going to sneak in with what looks like an invasion coming from the south there, and reinforcing area at Constantinopolis. Overall, not looking nice. This invasion not as powerful as the Hun invasion, but still something to be reckoned with since we have no forces in the area to stop it. Now Pontus is going to provide us a nice opportunity to actually weaken them somewhat here, because they're attacking the Arria fleet just sitting outside Constantinopolis, and our garrison fleet has the opportunity to go out and join that battle. Thought we might as well, especially since Pontus will probably take the brunt of the losses here, so we can just remove all of these naval units from a possible siege assault of Constantinopolis, which will make things way easier for us. We can focus on just the land army, which will only be coming from one direction, which is nice and easy to deal with. So there we go, took a few losses on the ships, but overall a very good trade to get rid of that enemy navy. Just to make things a little bit worse, we learned that a new phase in climate change has gone ahead, so that's going to reduce our food supply and reduce public order most likely in various regions, especially up in the north and especially in Britannia. I noticed though that the Arria army there is actually now taking attrition, which suggests that climate change has actually taken their food supply into famine, so at least that's something good coming out of all this. Now Constans is going to have to make a quite important decision here. He has just enough movement to go back and save Constantinopolis, and he of course has enough movement to go and save Aurelianus, or at least attempt to save him by joining that battle and making it a 2-on-4 army fight. So which one he chooses could have a pretty major impact, because both settlements could potentially be lost here. The question is it going to be possible to beat the Huns here even with Constans helping out? And does Constans care enough to actually go and take part in that difficult fight, rather than going back to save his own holdings at Constantinopolis, and of course saving his son, who is leading the garrison in that siege right now? I decided that in the end, even though it's probably militarily more sound to try and stop the Huns right now, Constans is going to abandon that frontier in order to rush back to his home city of Constantinopolis and just add himself to the garrison. He can't actually relieve the siege right now, but he can stand close enough that if Arya does attack, they'll basically just be completely outmatched on the balance bar and will have no chance. Just checking there to see if he's in reinforcement range, but unfortunately not. So he's made his decision. What will the consequences of that actually be? Father's banners. What? Can he not read? He must have one. Where did I... Look at this. Uncle Ambrosius must have handwritten a whole pile of these and sent them to every corner of the empire. The rumours were true. From the north and east come seas of refugees, and behind them a sea of dark horsemen that swallows everything in its path whole. He needed help. I thought that was where father went. Mars weeps, gentlemen, for he appears in good order before us, a hasty retreat beaten to the cost of his brother, our people, perhaps our whole land. I don't know what to do. Perhaps Aurelianus' courage will provoke mercy from the gods and he will be saved. At least we'll be saved from this joke of a siege, with father taking all the credit again. While Constans may be ignoring Aurelianus' call for aid, Tullus can actually come and help out in the situation, because he's going to need to move up to choke point the border anyway, and we can actually move all the way out into the Illyrian territory, the territory of our allies, where we'll still be choke pointing the Huns from getting into our territory. And from that position, we may be next turn able to actually go and intervene if needs be. Right now we don't have the movement to get close enough to do anything, so we'll just watch from the sidelines here and see if an opportunity arises. And the Huns are going to react to this very strongly. Apparently attacking Tullus here is a higher priority than actually taking that settlement, because they pull 3/4 of their besieging force away in order to attack Tullus. So we see the balance bar not looking good, the true power of 3 whole Hun armies here. We don't have to take this fight, luckily. We do have the ability to retreat, and the Huns were moving right onto the edge of their movement range there, so they're not actually going to be able to pursue Tullus as he moves away. Now we do see a couple of other Hun armies moving about the place in various points on the map. It seems that altogether they have something like 5 or 6 armies of a mere 2 regions. The Huns do cheat more than other AI factions, I believe, so that would explain that. Now Arya actually withdraws from their siege of Constantinopolis, so that's good. Probably the right decision, because they were about to get destroyed anyway. But Makran, going to be far more cheeky, going to take just half a stack deep into our territory to once again attack Tremontium. Tremontium having no luck in this campaign. It just seems to get targeted more than anything else. I guess it's just within movement range of the outside of our territory, so stuff can sneak in and take it. Now in this case I didn't bother showing the battle, even though I did fight it myself by a semi-popular demand that such battles are a bit repetitive, so we're just going to ignore that, pretend I auto-resolved it, and continue on looking for a more interesting fight. Constans is going to move over to Tremontium now to add to the garrison, especially because Constantinopolis is now safe by the looks of things, so that he's in a position to, if he needs to do anything, possibly go and move to Aurelianus, but definitely not using all his movement points to get as close as he could right now. Tullus is going to have to get out of there, because those 3 Hun stacks might just attack him now, and indeed they might even attack our border settlement there. We've got a decent garrison inside, but I do need to convert the place over to get a full garrison. It's only so big because I have the garrison building there that increases your garrison size, and Tullus going to go and add himself to the defences as well. Going to throw in a couple of mercenary ranged units in order to help him counter a potential spam of horse archers. I probably should have picked regular archers over crossbowmen there, but crossbowmen more useful against infantry as well, so they might be good in the long run. Now, the opportunity that this has brought Aurelianus is something we cannot miss, because of course with those 3 stacks now staring at Tullus, Aurelianus' siege is only 1 army strong, so he has the chance to sally out with his garrison to gain an advantage in this fight, break the siege, and hopefully take out a Hun army, although the balance bar shifts to basically the opposite once we get down onto the battlefield. The balance bar does have a tendency of lying to us like that, but oh well. Our strategy is going to be the noob box strategy, just forming a big wall of shields basically. We want the enemy's cavalry and most importantly their arrows to just crash against our shields and do as little as possible. Meanwhile, the enemy has two sets of large onagers. I sent some cavalry behind the enemy to deal with them. Luckily they left them really far behind, so they are totally exposed. But I wanted to show you the damage that these large onagers do to the noob box formation. So only one of the units is firing, but they are going to get a hyper accurate volley. Basically all the shots land on target and we see a big destruction tearing apart our legionary lines. This is big losses of such an expensive unit from such an enormous distance as well. These large onagers doing so much work for the enemy forces, and look at that volley, absolutely insane, seemingly laser accurate even at their maximum range. They seem to be far more accurate than regular onagers and far more destructive. Our line's getting torn apart. Luckily my cavalry managed to stop them before they got any more shots off. But just those two volleys actually killed nearly 100 of my troops as I tallied it by the end of the battle. So that was absolutely insane from those onagers. But anyway, with that done, now it's time to receive the enemy's arrows and cavalry charges. The enemy's lance is going to have a really hard time charging into our heavy infantry because they can't really break through or do much against them. So they'll just get stuck in a normal melee, totally to their disadvantage. But it's actually our counter-ranged fire that's doing the damage here. These guys are just friendly firing away, shooting right into the backs of our own units and just about sneaking shots over the top to take out the riders of the cavalry. Now this Hun army is different to usual Hun armies in that it has lots of really powerful infantry, so this fight's actually going a lot more like a normal fight than you'd expect against the Huns. They did do a lot of our cavalry shenanigans at the back of our line there, but we had so many reserves that they didn't do anything, and really it just came down to an infantry fight. Not many horse archers actually in this army either, so we really just needed to win this fight, and it was going badly because the enemy's infantry far outclasses ours. They're tier 3 infantry, our guys are tier 1, basically meaning we're screwed, so I'm putting my reserves right behind the front line ready to plug gaps there. Meanwhile, the enemy's foot archers going to be in trouble as our cavalry finds them. The enemy have already wasted all of their melee cav just charging into our line, so that's great. Their horse archers, for the few numbers of them that they do have, they are still at large and proving the usual difficulty, but we get a really lucky break because the enemy's general, who was just riding up and down in front of our line, gets killed by focused fire from our ranged units. So that is going to, of course, demoralize the enemy forces and make it super easy to rout them. So big thanks to all these archers who came in from the garrison who provided that service for us. So with that done, I simply got all my cavalry to charge into the backs of these enemy melee units. Now these units are high tier, as I said, so they're pretty hard to actually rout, even with no general, even with a rear attack. So we're going to have to work pretty hard to get anywhere here. The enemy actually turned around and started attacking my cavalry, which is the right thing to do here. Usually the AI doesn't even bother doing this. But we can of course now press forwards to rear attack with our infantry to get those rear attack morale shot bonuses. They're also throwing away one of their spear units here by trying to make it move through our line, which is just getting them killed. So very nice of the AI to sacrifice one of its best units like that. So at this point in the battle, victory is actually just guaranteed. It all went a little bit easier than expected. I sent my archers out to deal with the horse archers and they just ran away. So we never had to deal, really, with those annoying horse archers since they never had much of an impact on the battle. And the enemy's heavy infantry advantage was thrown away by the loss of their general and the fact that we could just completely surround them. So overall, as I said, a little bit of a standard battle against the Huns there that went particularly well. So this bodes well for the rest of the fight, although I don't think we'll be fighting an army as weak as that again. We will of course find out. Even in Hibernia in the far north, settlers from Eastern and Central Europe appeared, looking for walls and towers that still remained standing. And these new arrivals were generally not appreciated by the existing population, who were already having to deal with reduced food supplies and increased fears that these refugees were simply leading the enemy to new targets. The Roman administration had no particular policy on the matter and continued the de facto policy of the former empire, in which settlers were allowed to buy land as long as they provided military service. In reality, the empire could not afford to supply additional military units, so it ended up being a mere act of charity, but one that was steadily brewing discontent and rebellion. Thanks for watching, everyone. Aurelianus is going to have to stoop to some unconventional tactics as he is left alone to continue the fight against the Huns on the next episode of Fields of Mars.